Welcome to Sisters in Crime Murder Monday, where authors talk about their crime craft. My name is Jacq, and I'm a bibliophile, copywriter, occasional broadcaster and podcaster, and a member of Sisters in Crime Australia, where we've been celebrating women's crime writing since 1991. My guest for this month's Murder Monday is Dinuka McKenzie, who hails from Sydney. She was born in Sri Lanka. Hey, Dinuka, how are you?
Hi, Jacq. So lovely to be here. This is so cool.
Dinuka's debut crime fiction manuscript, The Torrent, won the 2020 Banjo Prize for Fiction, was published by HarperCollins in February last year to incredible acclaim. And it follows her protagonist, Detective Kate Miles, who is just weeks from maternity leave. And I have to say, one of my favourite detectives at the moment. And Taken, the second in the series, was longlisted for the 2020 Rochelle Prize, was published just a few months ago, already a proven hit with readers. And Dinuka is no stranger to fabulous publications. She's in the Dark Deeds Down Under Crime Fiction Anthology, and We're Not Writing. Of course, she works in the environmental sector and volunteers as part of the incredible team behind the Writers Unleashed Festival. Of course, she's also a mum, which I wasn't going to say, Dinuka, when you're not writing, because that's a full-time gig as well.
Yeah.
Dinuka, could you give us the elevator pitch for your latest crime novel, Taken?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is very cool to get to do this. So, yeah, absolutely. So, Taken is the follow-up to my debut, The Torrent, as you said, and it follows Detective Kate Miles. So it follows basically the characters that were set up in The Torrent, but it is definitely a standalone mystery. So we have Kate, her family, and her police colleagues, and they all kind of hang out in a fictional town in northern New South Wales. And in Taken, we essentially pick up Kate's story about 4 months after the events of The Torrent. And she is kind of struggling on multiple fronts with the pressures of a new bub. She's definitely kind of dealing with the fallout, some of the mental health fallout from some of the stuff that happened in The Torrent. And she's trying to prove herself back at work. And in the midst of all of this, she gets handed the biggest case of her career to date, which is the case of a young bub going missing, apparently abducted from her home. And it's Kate's job to find out who has taken baby Sienna. And the story kind of goes from there.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, I'm 3/4 of the way through it. I'm loving it. She is my favourite. She's just so human. I love it. I love it. But we suppose we should go to the questions. Okay. So, are you ready? First question is, how many drafts do you do before handing it in?
Ooh, okay. So I'm one of those people who are constantly changing as they go. So I honestly don't know. I don't kind of do like a first draft, like a quick first draft, and then come back to it. I have to just kind of just polish as I go. So it's not like perfect. It's nowhere near perfect, but I have to be kind of fairly happy with where it is before I can move on. So for example, if I move on and like I'll change something, say a character's, I don't know, even like, their profession or whatever, you know what I mean? And then I'll have to go, but now that means I have to go back and change chapter 3 and 2 and whatever.
Yeah.
I have to do that because it scratches at the back of my brain otherwise. So I cannot move on. Yeah. So it's by no means like this perfect, incredible draft. Like there's definitely, the publisher comes back and goes, you need to do a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah. But every time I do a draft, like in my mind, it is as complete as I know the story to that point. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So
so drafts within the first draft.
Yeah, so I never know how many drafts I have done. I mean, so when I am getting really into it, I tend to like email myself versions because I'm like, I can't lose that, and I'm often then like this time around, I think I wrote a scene where originally I had it where it wasn't, it was during school holidays. Oh, sorry, no, it was during the school time. And then I changed it to during the school holidays, but I'd emailed myself a version where I had written the paragraph where it was the school house. I just went back and anyway, I did things like that. So it's...
Yeah, it sounds like my kind of chaos. How important is place in your writing?
Yeah, look, I think it is. I mean, it's really interesting. I am not a person like when I read books, I like description where it doesn't kind of get in the way, if you know what I mean. So I'm not a big person who can read, say, pages and pages of like the architecture of a church or whatever. Like that doesn't interest me. So the way I include description of place is it has to kind of mean something in a way. So we're actually talking about this quite recently where, like, for example, if we were talking about a scene where Kate was with her dad, Gray, for example, and they were talking about, okay, I have to get her from the car to inside the house because inside the house she can finally start a conversation, which is what I'm interested in, right? I love dialogue, I love being in the character's head, but I need to get her from, you know, the car to inside the house. In order to do that, you're talking about the house and the picture frames and the books and the whatever. But what we were talking about is when you describe that, it's saying something about the character. So in this case, for example, we were talking about how she came into the house and she saw that the house, which still looked, you know, same shabby, kind of the same kind of picture frames that she always notices with her dad, but they looked neater, you know. So that's saying something about both characters. She is saying something about Kate because she's noticing this stuff, but it's also saying something about Gray, her dad, who doesn't normally have a house that looks a bit more spruced up. And so what's going on? So then it's creating the tension as well. Look, okay, well, why is the house looking different? So in that, so it's like creating a sense of setting and place and description, which has a connection to the character, if you know what I mean. That's more, I think, what interests me, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense. Next question. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Oh, God. I'm definitely not a detail plotter. That has actually got me trouble. So what I would call myself is a scaffolder. So I need to know, yes. Yeah. So I need to know like the basics. So I need to know, like, for example, in general, like who the kind of the baddie is, like, you know, or at least have a few suspects. And I need to know the kind of the main twist that I'm working towards. And maybe at least one or two of the subplots. Again, not in detail, but just like, okay, so I know I'm going to work on, say, Kate's relationship with her dad or, you know, whatever. I'm going to work on something to do with her boss. So I know that much. Do you know what I mean? And then I just kind of keep going and see how it goes. And if something changes, as I say, I go back and change it behind me before I can move forward. But I cannot do the detailed. So what happened with Taken was I did do the detailed planning, like I had an Excel because I did enter into the original prize. And you know how they require you to have like a chapter outline. And so I had to do this. So in order for me to do that, I went, okay, well, I'll do the proper planning and I'll do a full Excel spreadsheet and do all the chapter outline. And that really wrecked me because I did it. I sent it in and that was fine for the Rochelle, but then having to then follow that, it really wrecked me because in the middle of it, I came to the middle and I went, oh, this is not the story. And I had to like kind of thread it all and go back. And like, that was a nightmare. So no, me and details don't work, unfortunately.
I like the whole concept of a scaffolder. That really appeals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How do you work out your red herrings?
Ooh. I mean, I think like it's really hard to put those red herrings in until after the fact, I think, because you really have to know where the story is heading. It's very difficult to, you know, as much as I say I try and polish it as much as I can, I think a lot of those kind of detaily things I reckon come at that kind of structural and copy editing side where you get the feedback and they kind of, I mean, I think when your publisher and your editor kind of gives you feedback going, oh, this is not quite working, you need to seed a few more things in order for that the outcome to make sense. I very much remember, I think, say, for example, for Torrent, the final scene is from a certain character's point of view, and my publisher was like, no, I don't want this. I want it to end on Kate. I don't want this. And I was like, no, I really want this. But what I'd realized is I hadn't seeded it enough. Like, I hadn't given her enough in the actual book, so that when you got to that final chapter, it made sense and you wanted to end on that.
Yeah.
And I had to give a far more, like, I had to really go back and put a few things in to make that chapter make sense. So I think the red herrings and that seeding is very much, once you know what the story is, what you're trying to, like, what the twist you're trying to, the outcome you're trying to say, then you can kind of go back and go, okay, let's misdirect here. Let's change that one line of conversation. So it could mean, it could mean either way, and only when you come to the end and you realize, oh, that's what they meant, not what they, not what you thought they meant. You can kind of do that. So I think that's like the more detailed, like icing on the cake stuff that you do at the end. That's the good bit, because then you'll finish all the other crap. The story down. So that's
fantastic. Okay, does Detective Kate Miles ever surprise you?
Oh, I would say I know Kate really well, but what I will say is, this time around, and this has never happened, in saying that I've only written 3 books, so it's not like, oh my God, but this time around, one character did fully surprise me, in the sense that I was working towards a particular ending, and like 3/4 of the way through, and this has never happened to me, where it went, oh, actually, that's not the ending, is it? It's this. And that was, that's never happened to me. So that's the first time that's happened. And I think mostly in other books, it's probably other characters. Certainly in Taken, one of the characters from the Torrent comes back, and that backstory kind of came to me. So that was a surprise in that sense. So that was just what I was writing, and I'm like, oh, this is how that plot resolves itself. It was the backstory of, these 2 police colleagues. And it didn't, so that was a surprise in the sense that just came on the page. I hadn't really, I knew there was going to be some sort of subplot there, but I didn't know what it was. And it just connected that other character. And I was like, oh, good, I can just bring them along. And so I actually get quite a bit of feedback on that particular plot line, because people, including my agent, was very annoyed that I had given a backstory that made that character a bit more empathetic. And they were like, no, why'd you do that for? I wanted to hate him forever. So that was a surprise.
How much of you is in your characters?
Oh, I think particularly in the Torrent, I reckon, even though I thought to myself that I was hiding it really well, I reckon quite a bit of me is in Kate. And I think that was just how, like, that book evolved and how I started writing, because writing for me was a very kind of personal thing that had nothing to do with getting published or anything to do with the book world. It was very much me, having kids and really feeling like I'd lost my identity and trying to kind of crawl some space for myself. And so I just started writing, and the detective appearing on the page was purely reflective of my love of crime fiction, and the issues that she was dealing with was me processing all the stuff that I was trying to process. So I reckon there's a lot of me in her. I think by Taken, I very much had this whole cast of characters, and I could really separate her from myself, and she was she was Kate Miles, and she had this whole cast of characters, and I think there was far more separation, like by the second book, and certainly the third book, it's like that it's them, like it's now separate. and now in particular, because 2 books have come out, and I have really realized how much, like, writing is like how much it's like a 2-way thing, like, yes, you write it, and for so long Kate was all mine. Now, like, the readers have embraced it, and it's very much like a thing. It's their reaction to it. So it's very much now, I feel it's a very separate thing to me now, because it's like, readers have really embraced her. So it's now out there.
Oh, it's fantastic. Okay, what is your writing routine?
Oh, okay. So most of the look, I'm in an incredibly privileged position now that I'm pretty much full-time writing, and so while my kids are now primary school age, so they go to school, and I basically write during school hours. So I'm very lucky, incredibly privileged position to be able to do that. I would say, so essentially I just write. So anything writing related, which includes everything from social media to, updating my website to, like everything, I try and keep it to those hours. When I was trying to meet the deadline for book 3, that all got thrown out of the window. And I was just at every single moment that I could, I was like I couldn't understand before when people said, oh, every 20 minutes, I would use to write, but I was in that space where I was just like, I have to get this done. And that was, I basically blocked it out because it was those last 2 or 3 months. And Taken was already out, so I was doing publicity for that, but also writing in the background.
Wow.
And so it was really full on to try and just get it done. And that was, so in terms of that writing routine, was just every spare moment I was writing. Yeah.
That sounds phenomenally difficult. I mean, I could do that with reading, but I don't know if I could.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like because it's to deadline, it's a very different experience, where you're just la 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 just writing compared to But now I have, because I met the deadline, I feel like, okay, and I'm still making changes. Like even now, I'm still revising it and still kind of refining it. But I feel like, okay, I met the deadline, and I can, like, I know what I have to work with now compared to before, where I was just like, oh my God.
Oh, here's a good one. Is justice always served?
Ooh, okay, interesting. Look, I really do think that's why people keep coming back to crime fiction, because it is it is an escape from reality, because I think that in reality, justice is far more unfair. There is, like even if people do get arrested, court cases can run for years, and victims get re-traumatized, and it's just a whole schmozzle. And but I think crime fiction, what it does is that fiction space, it gives you resolution, even if it's for a time. So even if it's until the sequel, but there is a level of order from chaos. It may not be the perfect outcome. There might be some really full-on changes, and there has to be, like, even for the character, like internally, that justice has come at a price. Whether it's for their character or for the characters in the story, or if it's a justice, like a broader justice issue in terms of structurally, like in the police or whatever. So there could be quite a high cost to that order being achieved. But I think that is part of the pool of crime fiction. And I think if you had a crime fiction book that gave you no justice at all, I just don't think it will be enough of a resolution for readers to come back to, because that is the whole point. Like, there has to be some resolution, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but I think there has to be some level of order achieved.
So it doesn't have to be the Mickey Mouse Disney ending. It just has to.
Oh, no. And look, to be honest, I think readers have moved beyond that. I honestly don't think most readers, I mean, unless, most readers, I don't think want that perfect ending anyway, because they know the world is more complex than that, and I think it's more emotionally resonant for them to have a more complicated ending. And I think that's why the more complicated characters they do come back to, because even with Kate and whatever, like, all the stuff is not perfect. She doesn't often do the right thing, but you can see that she's trying to do the right thing. And often you're trying to reflect kind of our best, like the best of human, but also the worst, because I think that's the great thing about crime fiction, because it explicitly gives you the permission to explore that worst side of humanity, compared to just writing in general. Writing in general, obviously we're all trying to process human beings, but crime fiction, we explicitly allowed to go to that dark side. So
And the final question, how would you get away with murder?
Okay. So how I would get away with murder is to write it out, because like I wouldn't have a clue how to get away with the actual murder. The only way this works is because I know who the baddie is, and I can, put the points to kind of make it all work. Because I wouldn't have a clue. Because someone asked me this the other day, and I was like, well, I would make the policeman stand over there, and as long as the murderer comes at exactly 10 p.m. when I can be sure that the thing is that, then it will be the perfect murder. But otherwise, I wouldn't have a clue. It only works because you make it work.
Oh, I love it. Time has flown, but thank you so much, Dinuka. You've got gonna pull it out, the Taken, and the Torment. Taken. It's out now. We can't wait for the third installment. That's just phenomenal. But thank you so much for being part of Murder Mondays.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. I loved it. Thank you.
Murder Monday interviews are available on Sisters in Crime's YouTube channel at 6 p.m. once a month on a Monday.